doing international, most of my international stuff has been through Delta Airlines. And that's because Delta would fly into, let's see, we would fly, no, I take that back. Well, Delta was the only one I flew to Nicaragua. They had the hub that went into Nicaragua. I don't know if American went, but American Airlines was a lot higher when it did that, so than Delta in that flight. But American is the only one that goes there. We would fly in Brazil. We'd take whatever. I think maybe we might have flown American down to Miami, but in Miami you get on their Brazilian airline and fly in there from Miami. So lots of different routes you take to get wherever you're going. But I had no problem. I had no problem at all with American the last, 2 times I've flown there. It's been easy. I think I flew American going to Puerto Rico as well. Good to me as well, and the team. So no problems either way. So, but it's good. So we're ready to roll. At least I think most everybody is. Debbie's the only one that's not ready to roll, and we're still holding out for one more. Tomorrow morning is the last cutoff for her with a passport. If you don't show up tomorrow, you can just wish us bon voyage. One leg of the team missing, and it's an awkward leg anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So. Little cricket leg, it'd be how it is, that'd be all right. No, we will miss having you with us on there if it doesn't come tomorrow. We'll miss having you there. But it won't be the last trip, so the good thing about it is that probably by the time we take the next trip down there, you'll have your passport for sure. And, I feel certain it'll come in within the next 2 or 3 months. Yeah. So, yeah, I've got to order a new one as soon as we get back, and yeah, and because I won't. You have to be 6 months within 6 months, and I think I'm like 7 months. Yeah. After we get back, I have like 7 months before it expires, or 7 or 8 maybe. It expires next March. Yeah, yeah. My sister was telling me a friend of hers is a travel agent, and a couple that she was working with, he had his passport. This was a honeymoon trip, and he had his passport. She didn't, and she actually wound up driving to Little Rock, Arkansas, to their main office in Little Rock, and sat down with them and got it before she left. They drove down there, she got her passport and drove back. Turns out to be like a 20-hour day, I think, but they left it extremely early in the morning and got there and then got an appointment in there with them, and I want to see somebody now. She said, I'm not missing my honeymoon. So she got it, and they came back. So at any rate, we're good. I think it's going to be good. I told Sherilyn, she said, I'll relax once everything is gone on the plane. I said, not me. I'll relax when it gets through customs. When it's all through customs and I'm done, and it's being loaded into vehicles on the other side of the airport, this old boy's going to breathe and enjoy the rest of the trip. It'll be great then. So I just want to get it. So my tension level is a little bit high. We were driving, just driving today, and I was just thinking in terms of the vacation, 4th of July yesterday, and day off, whatever, and we drove past South Warren School, and I said, I wonder why they're not in school today. That holiday was yesterday. Sherilyn said, summer break, Mike, summer break. Get those kids back in school. get my life back in order here. And I don't even have children involved in this stuff, but get my life back in order here. Well, you know what? They're in school down there in Cuba. So we're having to operate around their schedule because the kids are in school. And so we're doing a Saturday VBS with the kids, Saturday and a Sunday morning finish up. And then we're doing one on Wednesday up on the mountain. And I don't know if the kids don't go to school up on the mountain or if they have a different schedule up there or not, but we're supposed to be doing VBS with them up on the mountain area. Puerto Boniato, which is the mountain of sweet potato mountain. Oh, we'll take pictures. Oh, yeah. Yeah, just give me your phone. I hope they do call you. I hope they do call you. We're finishing up in 1 Samuel, so we're down around chapter 27, I believe. Is that where we are, Nick? 27? I got my marker in 26. 26. Okay. Well, in 26 is when David spares Saul once again, and when he makes that statement in 26 and in verse 11, I'm not going to stretch my hand out against the Lord's anointed. And then you get into verse 23 of chapter 26 as well, and he makes that statement again because he's speaking directly to Saul at that point that I've refused to stretch out my hand against the Lord's anointed. We've jokingly, over the years of me being a pastor and minister, is that it's always been like a running joke. Don't touch the Lord's anointed, you know. And don't touch the preacher. No, you know, leave him alone. Don't touch the anointed one. And I never know if that's really been true or not for me, but it's kind of fun to say that. But the thing to note about that is that at the end of chapter 26, right there, you know, Saul said to David, "You're blessed are you, my son David, and you will both accomplish much and surely prevail." Saul knew what was going to happen, that David was going to take over. He said David went his way and Saul went his. And that was it. But it wasn't over for David, though, because David was still concerned that Saul was going to come after him. So when you start chapter 27, David's concerned. He said, "Now I will perish one day by the hand of Saul, and there's nothing better for me than to escape into the land of the Philistines," this is just, when your mind is focused on something that's outside of what God has already promised into your life, you can think strange things. I mean, you can get your head messed up and stuff. And so it says that David, they rose up, all 600 of those who were with him, and they went to Achish, the son of Maoch, king of Gath. What's Gath famous for? Remember what Gath is connected to? This guy that was about this tall? Goliath is from Gath. And and David is the one that killed him, if you remember. But now here David is going right into he's going right into the city of Gath right there. And you know, and it says in verse 3 that he lived with Achish at Gath, he and his men, each with his household, even David with his two wives, Ahinoam, the Jezreelitess, and Abigail, the Carmelitess, Nabal's widow. And verse 7, he lived there for a year and 4 months. Just lived there among them. And I find that just kind of really, I find it really odd that David would go that route, but he was so concerned about losing his life to Saul that he went to other extremes. And so, but Saul's not done. Saul's not done going after him yet. So you get into chapter 28, and this is probably one of the first times that we really hear a return from the dead, or that the dead rise, or the resurrection in the Old Testament. Resurrection is not in the Old Testament, but Saul is consulting a spiritist at this point. He wants to talk to Samuel. Remember, we already said Samuel died, and they buried him, and it was over with. Life was over. We're done at that point. But you get to verse 5 right there of chapter 28. Saul saw the camp of the Philistines, and he was afraid, and his heart trembled greatly. And so Saul inquired of the Lord, and the Lord did not answer him. Why? Why did the Lord not answer him? The Spirit had left him. It wasn't there anymore, and so didn't answer him, either by dreams or by Urim or by the prophets. So Saul, at verse 7, said, "Seek for me a woman who is a medium, that I may go to her and inquire of her." Well, the thing about it is that Saul had ordered them, all the mediums, to be killed prior, sometime back. So for him to seek a spiritist meant he was going against his own commands, and so he dressed up in strange clothing of some sort, and so that he wouldn't be recognized. And they found this woman. There in verse 11, the woman said, "Whom shall I bring up for you?" And he said, "Bring up Samuel for me. Bring up Samuel." And so she did, based upon the word here. When the woman, verse 12, when the woman saw Samuel, she cried out with a loud voice, and the woman spoke to Saul, saying, "Why have you deceived me? For you are Saul." He said, "Don't worry. I'm not going to do anything to you." You get to verse 15 over here. Corey, pick up verse 15. You're looking at it. Pick up there at verse 15.
Samuel said to Saul, "Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up?" "I am in great distress," Saul said. "The Philistines are fighting against me, and God has departed from me. He no longer answers me, either by prophets or by dreams. So I have called of you to tell me what to do."
Yeah. And Samuel says, "Why are you asking me? It's none of my deal anymore." But in verse 18, he says, "You didn't obey the Lord. You didn't execute his fierce anger, wrath on Amalek. So the Lord has done this to you." You get to verse 19. Go ahead and read verse 19 and 20.
"The Lord will deliver both Israel and you into the hands of the Philistines, and tomorrow you and your sons will be with me. The Lord will also give the army of Israel into the hands of the Philistines." Immediately Saul fell full length on the ground, filled with fear because of Samuel's words. His strength was gone, for he had eaten nothing all that day and all that night.
Yeah. Yeah. So Samuel says, "Don't worry, man. Tomorrow you're going to be with me. So you and your sons, you're going to be with me. So don't worry about it." And then, but then you get to chapter 29, and David's going to go out in this battle. He's going to go out in battle with the Philistines against the Israelites. But some of the Israelite leadership said, "No, we don't want him. Because we get out there in battle, and he turns and joins his Israelites, and then kill us all from behind." And they said, "No, you send him back." And so they did. David said, "Nope, you can't do this." And that's what chapter 29 is about. They departed and left, and so then you get into chapter 30. Now, Debbie, read in chapter 30. Read verses 1 and 2.
David and his men reached Ziklag on the third day. Now the Amalekites had raided Negev and Ziklag. They had attacked Ziklag and burned it, and had taken captive the women and all who were in it, both young and old. They killed none of them, but carried them off as they went on their way.
Yeah, okay. Also take note in verse 5, David's 2 wives had been taken captive. So the men are on their way back from being told, "You can't go fighting in this battle against the Philistines, against the Israelites with the Philistines. You can't go." So they're on their way back. Him and all his army are on the way back. And while on the way back, the Amalekites have attacked where they were living at Ziklag and took all the women and children, all their stuff, all their livestock, everything. They didn't kill anybody, didn't take it, but they took everything. And the men were so tired and exhausted, they wanted to kill David because he's their leader. He's the one who put him in that mess to begin with, put him in there with the Philistines, and then all this happened because of him. And so I admire right here because, you know, he's put him and his men in a bad position being with the Philistines anyway, but what he does there in verse 8. Damien, you want to read verse 8 right there.
And David inquired of the Lord, shall I pursue this raiding party? Will I overtake them? Pursue them, he answered, will certainly overtake them and succeed in the rest.
Yeah. So he inquires of the Lord. He goes to the Lord. Let's pray about this. You know, he's down, he's tired, he's fatigued. His men are wanting to kill him because of what he's done, but he says, let's take this to the Lord. I'm going to take this to the Lord. And he talks to the Lord about it. And do I pursue them? Do I go after them? And the Lord says, yeah, go after them. You're going to be victorious right here. Go on, Damien, verse 11 as well.
They found an Egyptian in a field and brought him to David. They gave him water to drink and food to eat.
Okay. And then verse 13. Read verse 13.
David asked them, who do you belong to and where do you come from? He said, I am an Egyptian, the slave of Amalekite. My master abandoned me when I came out 3 days ago. We raided
Yeah, you don't have to go any further. That's okay. So they find this young Egyptian slave. Give him food, give him water, find out that he's a slave, you know, he belongs to the Amalekites. And somewhere along the line, he fell sick, and his masters left him out in the desert to die because he wasn't worth anything anymore. And then you get down to verse 16 and 17. Corey, jump on that one.
He led David down, and there they were, scattered over the countryside, eating, drinking, and reveling because of the great amount of plunder they had taken from the land of the Philistines and from Judah. David fought them from dusk until the evening of the next day, and none of them got away, except 400 young men who rode off on camels and fled.
Yeah, and then verse 18. Finish off verse 18 there.
David recovered everything the Amalekites had taken, including his 2 wives.
Yeah, he got everything back. Got everything. And comes victoriously back in. And then they divide the spoils that they had taken. They took everything from the Amalekites. They killed all of the Amalekites there for what they had done. And he captured all the sheep and the cattle, which the people had drove ahead of the other livestock. And this is David's spoil, they said. So he got everything back. Not everybody went with him. Out of the 600, there was 400 who went back, who went with him to fight. 200 stayed back with the provisions and such there at the Ziklag. And so then there was the discussion was, do we give them part of the spoil? Do we give them part of this? You know, they didn't go with us. And David said, no, everybody gets, an even share of all of this stuff. And then you get to the last chapter there in verse 31, and this is where Saul and his sons are slain. Debbie, take the first 3 verses there, if you would, please.
The Philistines fought against Israel. The Israelites fled before them, and many fell slain on Mount
Gilboa. Yeah,
The Philistines, what did you say, Henry?
2 and 3.
The Philistines pressed hard after Saul and his sons, and they killed his sons Jonathan, Abinadab, and Malchishua. The fighting grew fierce around Saul, and when the archers overtook him, they wounded him critically.
Yeah, okay. Then, Damien, pick up verse 4 right there. 4 and 5. 4 and 5.
31.
Yes.
Saul said to his armor bearer, draw your sword and run me through, and these uncircumcised fellows will come and run me through and accuse me. But his armor bearer was terrified and would not do it. Saul took his own sword and fell on it. When the armor bearer saw that Saul was dead, he too fell on his sword and died with him.
Yeah. So it's kind of a sad situation right there, but says he fell on here, but when you get into 2 Samuel, there's somebody else that comes, whoever comes and reports this to David is going to take credit for, taking credit's the wrong way, but he's going to identify himself as one of those who run the sword through Saul at the help to end his life as an act of mercy. And David is not going to view it that way. He's going to be upset about it. But it came about there in verse 8, came about on the next day when the Philistines came to strip the slain, that they found Saul and his 3 sons fallen on Mount Gilboa. They cut off his head and stripped off his weapons and sent them throughout the land of the Philistines to carry the good news to the house of their idols and to the people. And they put his weapons in the temple of Ashtaroth, and they fastened his body to the wall of Bethshan. People were not kind to rulers. If you were killed, everybody wanted their people to know, or they wanted you to know that they killed your ruler. And so that they cut off his head and took his body and hung it on the wall outside their city gate and took all his stuff and offered it to their idols. And it's just, there was just a lot there that happens. It's pretty, when you read through 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, get into 1 Kings, 2 Kings, 1 and 2 Chronicles, and 1 and 2 Chronicles mimic really close to 1 and 2 Kings. They may offer a few different things in there, but that's a brutal period of history. It's just, it's brutal. And I read through there, and as I read through there, I just look at it and go, wow, this was rough. This was really a rough time for people. And then you get into that question, why did the Lord allow those things to happen during that time? And in the grand scheme of things, there's no answer for us to be able to give to that other than to learn from that history. But we don't always learn from that, because we can look at our own history and see some of the things that are extremely, extremely brutal. But now turn over to 2 Samuel, starting in the 2 Samuel, in the first chapter, just keep moving through there, because the story doesn't stop. Remember what I told you, that 1 and 2 Samuel used to be just one book. And it was just simply because of the size of the scroll that it became two. And so you have, it picks right up where it left off there. And Corey, pick up in verse 1 through 3 of chapter 1 there.
After the death of Saul, David returned from striking down the Amalekites and stayed in Ziklag 2 days. On the 3rd day, a man arrived from Saul's camp with his clothes torn and dust on his head. When he came to David, he fell to the ground to pay him honor. "Where have you come from?" David asked him. He answered, "I have escaped from the Israelite camp."
Okay, this is the man who's about to buy the farm. He's gonna tell David some things. Let's go on a little bit. Debbie, read 6, 7, and 8.
I happened to be on Mount Gilboa, the young man said, and there was Saul leaning on his spear, with the chariots and the riders almost upon him. When he turned around and saw me, he called out to me, and I said, "What can I do?" He asked me, "Who are you?" "An Amalekite," I answered. Then he said to me, "Stand over me and kill me. I am in the throes of death, but I'm still alive."
Yeah. Okay, go ahead and read verse 10 while you're at
So
it.
I stood over him and killed him, because I knew that after he had fallen, he could not survive. And I took the crown that was on his head and the band on his arm, and have brought them here to my Lord.
Yeah, okay. How about that? So here's a young man who is an Amalekite. He confesses he's an Amalekite. Probably not the best thing to say, because he's, who has David just returned from slaughtering? The Amalekites, because they took his wives and all their families. They're the ones. He's confessing who he is. May have not even been part of that raiding group. May not have been part at all, but he says, "I'm an Amalekite." But and this is why I'm thinking, because if you read back in the last part of 1 Samuel, Saul fell on his own sword, and when his sword bearer saw that he was dead, it says, he killed himself. Here's this young man who says, "I'm an Amalekite," and basically he's saying, I killed your king. I saw that he was wounded, and I went and finished him off, here's his crown and here's his royal bracelets. I brought them to you. And that part, yeah, but David didn't take kindly to that. And so you get over there to verse 15 and 16. Damien, read verse 15 and 16. Wait a minute. Go to verse 14, 15, and 16.
David asked him, "Why weren't you afraid to lift your hand to destroy the Lord's anointed?" Then David called on one of his men and said, "Go, strike him down." So he struck him down, and he died. For David had said to him, "Your blood be on your own head. Your own mouth testified against you when you said, 'I killed the Lord's anointed.'"
Yeah. Okay. So,
So did Saul kill himself or no?
well, see, when you finish off 1 Samuel, that's what it looks like. That's what, he's wounded. He's been wounded by archers. And so he's telling his sword bearer, take my life before they make sport of me, or before they come and, he figured they're going to come and stab on him and cut him and just kind of wound him up, because he's the king, and they're going to take advantage of that. But it says there that he fell on his own sword, and when the sword bearer saw that he was dead, the sword bearer took his own life.
So this guy lied, basically.
I think,
Hoping to get some.
maybe some recognition. The fact that he was an Amalekite and he's coming to David tells me that, first of all, he's probably lying about actually killing Saul, but he did show up there, and he got this. He got the goods from him. He got his crown and he got his bracelets to bring to David. And so maybe there's this hopefulness in him, that because if he's an Amalekite, he has to know that David's just finished slaughtering all these Amalekites for what they did. And so if he says, I'm an Amalekite and I showed mercy to your king by going in and killing him, here's his crown and here his, so that may be, I'm trying to get into the head right here that perhaps there's this, if I tell you this, then you'll show mercy to me and allow me to live rather than this, but it didn't work. David said, and David still referred to Saul even up there past the point of his death, that this was the Lord's anointed. He never took that away from Saul, even though he knew that the Spirit of the Lord had left him. But he still considered him as an anointed person, and as anointed by God to serve as king of Israel. And David would refuse. Obviously, we've seen that several times where David said, I'm not going to rise up against the Lord's anointed. I'm not going to touch the Lord's anointed. I'm not going to lay my hand against the Lord's anointed. Even though he knew Saul was trying to kill him, and he was anointed. David was anointed. He'd been, Samuel had already laid hands on him, had poured the oil on him, and he, anointed him as king, as the next king of Israel. But he's brought there, and so this is, it's just kind of a twisty turn thing that's going on. But the storyline just keeps moving right on through right here. So you get into chapter 2, and this is when it comes about that David's going to be made king. Corey, if you want to start off on chapter 2 right there, verses 1 and 2. Read verses 1 and 2.
In the course of time, David inquired of the Lord, "Shall I go up to one of the towns of Judah?" he asked. The Lord said, "Go up." David asked, "Where shall I go? To Hebron?" The Lord answered. So David went up there with his two wives, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel.
Yeah. So this is where he's going to be made king. Not without a little bit of conflict that's going to happen. If you scroll down to verse 8, it says, "But Abner, the son of Ner, commander of Saul's army, had taken Ishbosheth, son of Saul, and brought him over to Mahanaim, and made him king over Gilead, over the Asherites, over Jezreel, over Ephraim, and over Benjamin, even over all Israel. Ishbosheth, Saul's son, was 40 years old when he became king over Israel, and he was king for 2 years. And the house of Judah, however, followed David. The time that David was king in Hebron over the house of Judah was 7 years and 6 months. Becomes, so we're already in a little bit of a house divided right here. This is going to be the initial. Now it's going to come back together, but there's going to be that dividing line that's going to resurface itself down the road. It's going to happen again. By the time we get a couple of kings down from David, the nation's going to split, and it's going to split with Judah and Benjamin being one as the southern tribe, and all the other 10 tribes are going to be the northern tribe. And this is going to continue being a falling apart right in there, and it's going to be battles, and you're going to have northern kings and southern kings, and all this is going to transpire over the course of time, and eventually the 10 tribes of the northern kingdom will disappear. And they're considered even today as the lost tribes of Israel, because they just disappeared. They were captured at in 721 BC, I believe it was, 721 BC. The northern kingdom fell under Babylonian rule, and it never happened again. It was never brought back. Nobody ever returned to any of those places. 586 BC, the southern kingdom fell, and that's when it fell during the Babylonian conflict that lasted 70 years. And I will get to that, but then they began to come back, and that's when you have Ezra and Nehemiah, where the rebuilding of the temple, rebuilding of the walls, rebuilding of Israel, Jerusalem, rebuilding of Jerusalem takes place during that time. So there's a lot that happens, but the northern kingdoms, the northern tribes never come back. All you have is Judah and Benjamin that are composed of the southern tribe. Judah is the largest tribe of all 12 tribes of Israel. They're together they're as large as the 10 tribes together as well. So there's a lot that's going to happen right there over the course of the several hundred years. Happens right there. Get into chapter 3. It says that there was a long war between the house of Saul and the house of David, and David grew steadily stronger, but the house of Saul grew weaker continually. Then you have others that are going to join David, and people are going to, their allegiances are going to move from one port, from the house of Saul to the house of David. There's going to be some they're going to move over toward David because David's getting stronger, and so this is what's going to happen over the course. And if you remember, early on, in one of Saul's attempts to get to David, he offered his daughter to whoever would go out and beat the Philistines. He offered his daughter's hand in marriage, and David was the one that did that. And then Saul required of David to go get 100 foreskins of the Philistine soldiers, and David come back with 200 instead, and took Michal, M-I-C-H-A-L, Michelle, whatever, as his wife. Now you get in, but then he had to flee. David had to flee, and so he left her behind. And when he left her behind, Saul gave her to Abner. Maybe it was Abner? No, not Abner. He gave her to one of his commanders. So now David's back. David's in charge. And you get to verse 14. David sent messengers to Ishbosheth, Saul's son, saying, "Give me my wife, Michal, to whom I was betrothed, for 100 foreskins of the Philistines." He said, time to bring her back. Bring her back. Yes, ma'am.
I thought a person had to be a prophet to be able to anoint somebody. And here, Abner, son of Ner, he just decided that he was going to make somebody king.
Yeah, he just appointed Saul's son, Ishbosheth. He just appointed him as king. Yeah.
Well, Saul was anointed, wasn't he? But,
He was originally, but the Lord removed his spirit from him.
right. But then the son that did this, he was not anointed.
No. No.
But as a rule, they were anointed to appoint somebody as king.
Yes. Yeah, as a rule they were. But then a lot of that changes over the course of time. People get appointed. It becomes more of a hierarchy of family. Like when David turns over the throne, it's turned over to Solomon. And Solomon turns over the throne, it's turned over to Rehoboam. And when Rehoboam takes the throne, that's when the nation split. I mean, the northern kingdom, southern kingdom split under the rule of Rehoboam. And Jeroboam becomes the king of the northern kingdom, and Rehoboam is king of the southern kingdom. And that's about as far as my brain goes on those. I can't pull them out through there. But the anointing of being king is not necessarily, you'll see that happen in some. The priest will anoint or will appoint or declare this person to be king, and they may anoint him. I think Josiah, Josiah, but he was like 7 or 8 years old when they appointed him or anointed him as king. There's a whole, but typically you're supposed to be anointed to be king in there. Didn't always happen, but it was supposed to. It was supposed to happen in there. So David says, I want my wife back, and he brings her. He goes and gets her and brings her back. Abner is scared of David. He becomes afraid of David. And Ishbosheth is afraid of David. And so there's this concern about what's going to happen. Joab is a commander for David. And he was the commander under Saul's army, but he aligned himself with David and becomes David's commander-in-chief, so to speak. He has plans of his own, but he's serving David. It becomes a convoluted mess. And David, when you begin to read, and we've studied David in here, but when you read through David's life and this time in his life, when he becomes king, he's going to take more wives and more concubines, and he's going to have more children. He's going to have many children. Not all of them are named, but they're all in there, and so it's going to be one thing after another, and David's going to lose sight of his own household, and that's going to begin to falling apart. It's just a mess. But you get to verse 26 of chapter 3, and Corey, read that for us, 26 and 27.
Joab then left David and sent messengers after Abner, and they brought him back from the cistern at Sirah.
Yeah.
But David did not know it. Now when Abner returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside into an inner chamber as if to speak with him privately. And there, to avenge the blood of his brother Asahel, Joab stabbed him in the stomach, and he died.
Yeah. It's just one little conflict thing after another. Then when you move to chapter 4, when Ishbosheth, Saul's son, heard that Abner had died in Hebron, he lost courage because Abner was the one who had appointed him as king. So Abner's dead, and all Israel is disturbed. This is where you're going to start getting the names of Israel and Judah are going to start. You're going to start seeing those names pop up. David's going to bring everything back together, and it's just going to be the nation of Israel again. But it's not going to stay that way. It's going to divide to Judah and Israel. So it's going to be two different southern and northern kingdoms. Is what it's going to wind up being before too long. And so this is kind of where we are. This is where we're moving through right here. But David is still respects Saul and his legacy. See, when you kill a king, you're supposed to kill all his family too. Because you don't want any possibility of anybody to come back or to take over or to rise up. So it's kind of unusual to see those things. And so David is asking about this. He wants to know if there's anybody that is left in Saul's family in there. Now, it tells us that in verse 4. Debbie, read verse 4.
Jonathan, son of Saul, had a son who was lame in both feet. He was 5 years old when the news about Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel. His nurse picked him up and fled, but as she hurried to leave, he fell, became crippled. His name was
Come on.
Mephibosheth.
There you go, Mephibosheth. Just say it fast. It rolls right out. Mephibosheth. The only reason I know how to say it that way is that my church at Dripping Spring, when I was there, children did a play, children did a play called No Fibbing Mephibosheth. And so if you could learn to say No Fibbing Mephibosheth, you can roll your tongue most around anything, pretty much. So that's what it was there. And so the sons, Mephibosheth is this, he's grown now, he's still a cripple. Like the nurses, they're trying to escape or to run and hide, and he falls. I think, get the impression that she fell on him, trying to carry him away at 5 years old, and he becomes lame in his feet from that point on. So they come to find him. They want to find him, and they do so there in verse 7. When they came into the house, as he was lying on his bed in his bedroom, not Mephibosheth, Ishbosheth was there. They killed Ishbosheth, who was one of the other sons. I'll say again, they find him in his bedroom, they struck him and killed him and beheaded him. Because that's what you do. But we don't know about Mephibosheth. David doesn't know about Mephibosheth yet. And but at some point he's going to find out. He wants to find out what's going on with him. Listen, it's about 25 after. I'm going to stop right there. David's about to become king over all Israel, and that's a good place to take a hiatus from there. Damien's going to teach you about that next week. Unless I need to find out from Laura Benton if she's got somebody covering for her.
Right, if she doesn't, I'll be glad to cover for her. I'll be
Well,
here.
we'll find out what she's doing. So, and put the word out what we're going to do. So, guys, thank you for letting me roll on through there a little bit. Some things you need to see what's happening, and then when we get into 1st and 2nd Kings, we'll peruse through that pretty quickly, and in Chronicles we'll kind of blend things together through there. I may make a big deal out of Old Testament stuff, and I do so because I think it's important to understand your biblical history, to see where all the things that have happened, all the things that have transpired to bring them to the point of where Jesus comes in the fullness of time. So there's a lot of things that are going to happen that create the fullness of time before Jesus arrives. And so to learning all these things about what's happening and how brutal this point of history is right here, it doesn't stay that way, but it lasts a long time, hundreds and hundreds of years, is one war after another, one battle after another, one fight after another, one clan fighting against another clan, one group of people against another group of people. The thing about it is, if you go back into the beginning of the Old Testament, I just started reading in the English Standard Version, Old Testament, and I'm reading through Genesis. I'm just in Genesis in the first 12 chapters there, in the beginnings there. And then you begin to see right there the names of the sons of Noah's sons, of Ham, Shem, and Japheth, something like that. Their sons, one of their sons is Canaan. He becomes father of the Canaanites. And you find there's a number of these individuals who their names become the names of the cities that are opposed to the Israelites later on. And so you start connecting those dots back there. Oh, this is the father of this. And you'll read where one is the father of the Asherites or of the Amalekites. One of them is Amalek, is there. One of them that caught me off, that took me by surprise, that one of the sons' names was Magog. And Magog is an idol later on becomes one of the idols of idol worship. His name is, there is the Gog and Magog. But originally that was the name of one of the children of the sons of Noah. So, yeah, it's strange how, you start putting those things together, and he goes, man, you start connecting dots together in this Old Testament thing, and you start seeing things that you hadn't seen before. And it all begins to play out down through the course of time here, through the history of the Israelites, until you get to the point where God's finished and there's silence for 400 years before John the Baptist comes onto the scene. It's just how it rolls. So, gosh, so much is happening. And this, it's not going to be long. You know, you're going to have kings that last 1 week, and then they're killed by somebody, and their whole family's wiped out. Then you're going to have another king, he's going to last 30 years or 20 years before he's finally killed. And, you know, I think there was one that lasted 2 days. And no, you don't get to learn anything at all about this. You know, you just take over, and somebody says, no, you're not taking over. God, put that knife right in the belly and take over that way. So that, you know, to me, that's what I find it fascinating that all these things go, but this is kind of my world that I operate in. But I see how important these things are that take us from one thing to another. And then then it goes from there to the next thing. And it's just like in your own. I read something the other day that for you to be born, there had to be 2 people to begin with. And then there had to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 people. Right? There had to be 8 people on the next generation back. And then before that generation, for 8 people, there had to be, 32 people? And just keep tracing it back, go history back. And in order for you to be born, there's something like 4,000 people had to be involved in that process. When I read that, I had never thought about it in those terms, but I thought, wow. That you weren't even a twinkle in your mother's eye. And there were 4,000 plus people that were already involved in the whole process before you were born. And when I look in this Israelite history and I see this king and this king and this king, what happened to him, and all the people that were involved, and it begins to filter all the way back. It's going to filter back to Noah because remember, cuts off. Noah started it all over again. By the way, if you read the history, if you think about it, you read through Noah, read that history right in there, that first 11 chapters of Genesis, read through there. And what you'll find out is that Noah's father and grandfather were still alive when the flood came. If you look at how old Noah was, like 600 years old when that happened. His father was 900 and something years old before he died. And his father was not. So it's like when we read about Methuselah being the oldest person, if you read history correctly, I believe Methuselah was still alive when the flood came. So again, one of those little things you look at and go, how about that? How about that? Okay. All right, let's stand together. Thank you all for being here tonight and spending time together in the Word and learning a little bit more of history. Y'all pray for us tomorrow afternoon. Debbie, I'm still hoping and praying that you're going to get, magically it's going to show up at your door tomorrow. But if it doesn't,
Still have my little suitcase packed on my kitchen table.
okay.
Carry on.
All right. Well, that's all we need. That's all we need. Hey, Tony, take us out tonight, would you please?